Hello, everyone. Welcome to Lessons from Life. My name is Eleanor Brooks, and I'm 72 years old. I live alone in a quiet brick house at the edge of a peaceful town. Every room inside this home holds a memory. My late husband, Henry, built this house with his own hands when we were young. In the front yard, he planted bright red roses that still bloom every spring. Whenever I see them, I'm reminded of the flowers he used to surprise me with while we were dating. For many years, Henry and I dreamed of having a child. We waited, hoped, and prayed, but life had different plans for us. Then, when I was 37 years old, everything changed. We adopted a baby boy named Lucas. The first time I held him, I knew he belonged with us. We raised Lucas with all the love in our hearts. Henry taught him how to ride a bike, hammer a nail, and always keep his word. I packed his lunches, helped with homework, and stayed awake through every fever and nightmare. We never thought of him as our adopted son. He was simply our son. Now Lucas is 35 years old, and I still remember the little boy who filled this house with laughter, muddy footprints, and endless curiosity. Then one day, an exciting opportunity came. He was offered a great job in the city. I was proud of him, but the thought of an empty house made my heart ache. On the morning he was leaving, Lucas handed me a small gift wrapped in shiny silver paper. "Go ahead, Mom," he said with a smile. "Open it." Inside was a simple little cell phone. It wasn't anything expensive, just a tiny screen, a green call button, and a few large numbers. I turned it over carefully in my hands. "I've never used one of these before," I admitted. Lucas chuckled. "You don't need to know much. Whenever you miss me, just press the green button. I'll answer whenever I can." I held the phone tightly. Somehow, it already felt more valuable than anything else I owned. I looked at him and quietly said, "Promise me something." He smiled. "Anything. No matter how busy your life becomes, don't let too many days pass without letting me hear your voice." Without saying another word, he hugged me tightly. "I promise, Mom, I'll always make time to call." Those words stayed with me long after he drove away. I stood by the front window until his car disappeared around the corner, holding that little green phone close to my chest. From that day forward, it never left my side. Every morning it rested beside my cup of tea. Every evening, it sat next to my favorite chair. Every night, it waited on the table beside my bed. It wasn't just a phone anymore. It was the only thing that made the distance between my son and me feel just a little smaller. The first few weeks were everything I had hoped for. Almost every morning, just as I finished making my tea, the little green phone would ring. The cheerful melody echoed through the quiet house, and before the second ring, I was already smiling. "Good morning, Mom," Lucas would say. Hearing those words made the house feel alive again. He told me stories about his new apartment, the people at work, and the busy streets outside his window. Sometimes he laughed about getting lost on the subway or burning dinner because he was trying to cook after a long day. I laughed with him, even when the jokes weren't very funny. I simply loved hearing his voice. After every call, I found myself smiling for hours. Sometimes I even cooked his favorite meals, roast chicken with mashed potatoes or homemade vegetable soup. Even though I ate alone, I always imagined Lucas sitting across the table, telling me about his day, just like he used to. Before going to bed, I wrote in my diary, "Today, my son's voice filled this old house with happiness once again." Those simple conversations became the brightest part of my day. But little by little, things began to change. One morning, the phone stayed silent. I told myself he was probably running late. By evening, there was still no call. The following day, my phone finally rang. "I'm sorry, Mom," Lucas said quickly. "Work has been crazy." "It's all right," I replied with a smile he couldn't see. "Just take care of yourself." I truly believed it was only a busy day. But then another day passed, then another. The daily phone calls slowly became weekly ones. When he did call, the conversations felt different. They were shorter, rushed. Sometimes I could hear music playing in the background. Other times there were people laughing around him. "Are you with friends?" I asked one evening. "Yeah," he answered. "Just a few coworkers. Don't worry about me." "I won't," I said. But after we hung up, I worried anyway. Weeks quietly turned into months. The silence inside my house became louder than ever. Still, I refused to change my routine. Every morning I placed 2 cups on the kitchen table before realizing only one would be used. Old habits are stubborn companions. Whenever I cleaned the house, the little green phone rested in my apron pocket. When I watered Henry's roses, it stayed beside me on the porch. At night, I placed it on the table next to my bed so I could hear it if it rang while I was asleep. Every vibration made my heart race. I'd grab the phone with hope, only to find a telemarketing message, a wrong number, or another advertisement. Each disappointment left the room feeling even quieter than before. One afternoon, an unknown number appeared on the screen. I answered immediately. "Hello, Lucas?" There was a brief silence. Then a stranger apologized. "Sorry, wrong number." I whispered, "That's all right," before ending the call. For a few seconds, I simply held the phone against my chest. Just hearing another human voice had made me realize how lonely I had become. Since Lucas rarely called anymore, I began writing letters to him inside my diary instead. Letters I never planned to mail. "Dear Lucas, the roses your father planted are blooming beautifully this year. I wish you could see them. Dear Lucas, I made your favorite soup today. I accidentally cooked enough for 2, just like always. Dear Lucas, I hope you're eating well and getting enough sleep. Don't work too hard, sweetheart." Those pages slowly became the conversations we no longer had. Autumn faded, and winter arrived earlier than usual. The mornings became colder, and the wind rattled the old windows of my little house. The roses Henry had planted stood bare, their bright colors replaced by empty branches waiting for spring. The silence felt heavier with every passing day. Neighbors still stopped to chat whenever they saw me outside. "Has Lucas been home lately?" Mrs. Carter asked one afternoon. I forced a smile. "Oh yes, he's just been busy with work." It was easier than admitting the truth. No one knew how many evenings I spent sitting beside the window with that little green phone resting in my lap. Every passing car made me look toward the road. Every pair of footsteps outside made my heart hope it was him. But they never stopped at my door. One particularly cold evening, I sat beside the fireplace with a blanket around my shoulders. Above the mantel hung Henry's photograph. I looked into his familiar smile and quietly whispered, "I don't know how much longer I can keep waiting." The room remained silent. For a moment, I imagined hearing his gentle voice. "Don't lose hope, Ellie." I smiled through watery eyes. I promised I'd always be here for him. That promise was the only thing keeping me company. A few days later, dark clouds covered the sky. Rain tapped softly against the windows, turning into a steady storm by evening. I was sitting in my favorite chair, knitting a blue scarf. I had planned to give Lucas for Christmas. The television played quietly in the background, though I wasn't really watching it. Then, the little green phone rang. My heart nearly stopped. For a second, I simply stared at it. Then I grabbed it with trembling hands. "Lucas?" I answered, unable to hide the hope in my voice. There was only silence. Then a calm man's voice spoke. "Good evening. Am I speaking with Mrs. Eleanor Brooks?" "Yes," I replied quickly. "This is she." The stranger hesitated before continuing. "My name is David Collins. I'm calling from St. Mary's Hospital." My smile slowly disappeared. I found your phone number inside a wallet belonging to a man named Lucas Brooks." The room suddenly felt colder. My fingers tightened around the phone. "Is he all right?" I asked. No answer came immediately, only the sound of rain striking the windows. Finally, the man spoke again, his voice filled with sympathy. "I'm deeply sorry, Mrs. Brooks." And in that single moment, I knew my life was about to change forever. I couldn't breathe. My hands trembled so badly that I nearly dropped the phone. What do you mean?" I whispered. On the other end of the line, the man paused before speaking again. "Mrs. Brooks, Lucas was involved in a serious car accident about 2 months ago." The words echoed inside my head. 2 months. It couldn't be true. "There must be some mistake," I said quickly. "You have the wrong person. My son, he's been busy with work. That's why he hasn't been calling." I wanted to believe my own words. I needed to. "I'm very sorry," the man replied gently. "We confirmed his identity through his driver's license and personal belongings. We searched for emergency contacts, but your number wasn't listed there." We only found this phone number written on a small piece of paper inside his wallet. Everything around me became silent. The rain outside, the ticking clock, even my own heartbeat. It was as if the world had stopped. When? I finally managed to ask. When did it happen? About 8 weeks ago. 8 weeks. For 8 long weeks I had been sitting beside my window, waiting, listening, hoping that little green phone would ring. I thought my son had forgotten me, but he never had the chance to call. Tears filled my eyes, but none of them fell. The pain was too deep for tears. The man continued speaking about documents, personal belongings, and arrangements that needed to be made. His words sounded distant, like voices carried away by the wind. I barely heard anything after that. When the call ended, I remained frozen in my chair. The phone slowly slipped into my lap. Outside, the storm continued without mercy. Inside, my world had fallen completely apart. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat in the darkness holding the little green phone against my heart. The screen remained black. No new calls, no missed messages, just silence. Yet, when I closed my eyes, I could still hear Lucas laughing. I could still picture the little boy running through the hallway with scraped knees and messy hair. I remembered teaching him to tie his shoes, watching him graduate, helping him pack for his first apartment. Every memory came rushing back, one after another. By sunrise, I walked quietly to my desk and opened my old diary. For several minutes, I stared at the blank page before writing just one sentence. Now I know why the phone never rang. My son wasn't too busy to call me. He had already gone somewhere my voice could no longer reach. A week after that heartbreaking phone call, a small package arrived at my front door. I already knew where it had come from. My hands shook as I carried it inside and placed it on the kitchen table. For several minutes, I couldn't bring myself to open it. Finally, I untied the string. Inside were Lucas's personal belongings, his worn leather wallet, the silver wristwatch he had worn for years, a ring of keys, and beneath them all, a framed photograph. It was a picture of the three of us standing in our garden years ago. Henry had one arm around my shoulders, and Lucas was laughing with his head tilted back toward the sky. It was one of the happiest days of our lives. I gently traced their faces with my fingertips before placing the photograph beside Henry's picture above the fireplace. For the first time in years, my little family was together again, at least in photographs. The little green phone remained in my hands. I looked at it for a long time before placing it beside the two pictures. It still had battery power. It still worked perfectly. But I finally understood. Some calls were never meant to come. Life slowly settled into a different kind of silence. Every morning, I still woke before sunrise. I still brewed 2 cups of tea out of habit, one for myself, one for the son who would never walk through my front door again. Sometimes I caught myself setting an extra plate on the table before quietly putting it back into the cabinet. Grief doesn't disappear overnight. It simply learns to live beside you. I continued writing in my diary, but the words became different. Instead of asking why life had taken so much from me, I began writing about the beautiful memories it had given me. I wrote about Lucas's first day of school, his terrible attempts at baking cookies, the afternoons he spent helping Henry in the garden, the way he hugged me every Christmas before opening a single present. Little by little, the memories stopped making me cry. Instead, they made me smile. On warm evenings, I often sat on the front porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of orange and gold. A gentle breeze would drift through Henry's roses, carrying their sweet fragrance across the yard. Whenever it happened, I closed my eyes. For just a moment, it almost felt as if both of them were still nearby. Not gone, just beyond my sight. The little green phone still rests on my bedside table every night. I charge it from time to time, not because I expect it to ring, but because it reminds me of a promise between a mother and her son. People often say that death ends everything. I don't believe that anymore. I believe love simply finds another way to stay with us. Sometimes it's hidden inside an old photograph. Sometimes it's found in a familiar scent, a favorite song, or a quiet memory that appears without warning. And sometimes it lives inside a small green phone that will probably never ring again. One day, when my own journey comes to an end, perhaps I'll hear that familiar ringtone one last time. This time, when I answer, I won't hear silence. I'll hear a warm, familiar voice, smiling through the distance. Hi, Mom. I've been waiting for you. See you in the next video.